Hello! We are getting really close to the release of the Xbox Series X and Series S, and thanks to the cool opportunity of being able to check out this kind of dummy prototype version of the Series X, I thought it'd be awesome to take a look at every single version of the Xbox over the years and seeing how they've evolved and changed. So to begin with, let's take it all back to where it very first started with the original Xbox. Released back in 2001, the original Xbox was Microsoft's first step into console gaming. They obviously already had a hand in PCs.
Start Windows 95.
But they wanted to try and start going toe-to-toe with other companies like Sony and Nintendo for the home console setup.
The Xbox is everything the Rock is. Cutting edge, powerful, exhilarating.
What really distinguished the original Xbox from its competition, aside from its absolutely massive size, is the fact that it was by far the most powerful system of its generation, owed to the fact that obviously it came out the last, so it knew what it was competing against, and in order to try and get it out as quickly as they could, Microsoft actually made use of off-the-shelf parts rather than having anything custom designed for the system. As a result, that's actually why the original Xbox is so big, because they didn't have any parts designed to fit a custom smaller chassis. They just kind of bought what they were going to buy and made a shell around it that would work. This is also true for what is probably one of the longest lasting parts of its legacy, the original Duke controller, which is an absolutely massive design, thanks to the fact that, again, they designed and manufactured the internals for it before actually resting on what they wanted the final version to look like.
Taco Bell's the only place in the country that has an Xbox you can win.
While the PS2 absolutely dominated when it came to this generation, the original Xbox actually did really well for being the new kid on the block. It was the second top most selling system, albeit with a very large margin up to the PS2, but it also laid the groundwork for what became an emphasis in their next system, the Xbox 360, with online multiplayer gaming. While the original Xbox was the last system to come out in its generation, the Xbox 360 came out before its competition by a full year, at least versus the PS3, releasing in 2005 at that same price point of $300. Design-wise, it separated itself from the original by actually making use of custom internal parts, so it could be a much smaller design. It was also the first Xbox system to emphasize the concept of being able to support both tower and landscape mode, with a design that I think really favored the tower look, although if you wanted to go with landscape, it still worked out really well thanks to the disc trays design, keeping the wording this way. Now, while this is what they all looked like, there were actually a lot of different model divisions all shared under the same basic name of Xbox 360. When it first launched, there were two different model options to choose from. They also eventually launched the Core, the Elite, the Arcade, all of which offered slightly different options as far as what kind of ports were available, what kind of storage they came with, and so on and so forth. Thanks to its earlier release, a great earlier library of games, PS3 botching its own launch with a lot of problems that happened early on, and really pioneering and moving forward how to work social networking in gaming with things like achievements and having a gamer profile, the Xbox 360 was a huge hit. If it wasn't for the fact that a lot of them also got really hot and led to the very popular problem of Red Ring of Death.
3 red lights.
Ah, the red rings of doom.
Mine just crashed this holiday season.
You're gonna need some towels.
Now, there were later versions of this that did include different internals that were less likely to catch on fire and cause red ring, but it was a common enough issue that Microsoft ended up having to extend warranties on all the Xboxes affected to it, and it became a major loss for them in the long run, even though as far as raw sales go, the system was doing great. Thanks to the infamy of the Red Ring of Death and just better internal parts becoming available, they did eventually release and rebrand the Xbox 360 with a new design, the 360S. Released in 2010, the 360S was a much smaller version of the original 360, keeping the same kind of basic idea for its design with the emphasis on tower mode and that kind of curving towards the inside, but instead of being a rounded edge, it had much more straight lines leading to the center. One of the biggest things it's really accomplished was just being a much more efficient system that ran a lot cooler, so it did not have that red ring issue, but there were a whole bunch of other upgrades this had to offer over the original 360. It changed the top loader hard drive design into an internal one, which kept it hidden. It was an overall, I think, much better looking system. This is actually my favorite out of the 360 line of designs. And one of the biggest upgrades for a lot of people was actually having a built-in Wi-Fi connection rather than having to buy a separate adapter that was really pricey for its time. This also changed up the aesthetic of the Xbox a little bit. Whereas the original one really focused on white with only the Elite model coming in a black finish, the 360S focused on that all-black design, initially launching in a pure glossy one that scratched very easily and looked really pretty at first. It just wouldn't hold up over a long period of time, and eventually also having a matte finish like this one, which honestly looks and has aged really great. Now, this was a major upgrade over the original 360, but it's not the last version of the 360 that Microsoft made. They had one more revision in mind for this generation they saved to launch alongside their next-gen systems, the Xbox Ones, with the Xbox 360e. This came out in 2013 alongside the Xbox One, and whereas the 360S was like a major upgrade over the original 360, the 360e was more of a slimmed-down, cheaper version. It was being sold at $250 rather than $300, and the main goal of it was to be a cheap alternative for people that were still interested in buying an Xbox but didn't necessarily want to buy a next-gen Xbox One at $500. Internally, it was very similar to the 360S. The only real major changes were the outwards design, which was meant to mimic and look very similar to the Xbox One, having flatter sides, making use of that half matte, half black design, vents on the sides as well, and it actually featured less ports than the 360S by dropping AV support, making it a purely HDMI-only system, and got rid of its optical out as well. It did, however, still keep the dedicated port for the Kinect because that was the main thing Xbox was still really heavily pushing at this time, thinking it would revolutionize gaming, until it didn't. Which we'll talk about in a little bit. In fact, let's just go ahead and move on now to the Xbox One. While the Xbox 360 was a major win for Microsoft and had them going toe-to-toe with a lot of their competition, the initial launch of the Xbox One was not so much that. Released in 2013, the original design of the Xbox One heavily emphasized a concept of the system being an all-in-one media entertainment service. It wasn't just about gaming anymore, it was about everything that a system could allow you to do on your TV, including the fact that this system not only featured HDMI outs to connect to your TV, but also HDMI ins so you could plug your cable box into it. They thought it was cool at the time. While the 360s got us more familiar with smaller systems, the Xbox One went heavy on the big side. Part of this was kind of informed by the issues and dangers they had with the original 360 overheating a lot, so to combat that, the Xbox One went for the opposite goal of being a much larger system, fans everywhere, external power brick, everything to make sure the system ran nice and cool and quietly. Which it did, just at the expense of making it very large. The system launched at $500, a whole $100 more than their competitor, the PS4, thanks to the fact that it was a forced bundle with the Kinect.
You've come back for more, Ian.
Yep, let's do it.
Something that was a optional accessory for the 360, but was now being driven as an essential part of the Xbox One ecosystem. While some of this sounded really cool in concept, the very heavy emphasis on Kinect being always on and a forced part of the system, as well as a lot of really heavy confusion over how Xbox wanted to handle digital games and basically get rid of physical media but treat discs as basically CD keys, led to a lot of anger and misinformation for fans, leading to it having a really painful launch compared to the PS4.
You ever wonder what the bottom of an Avatar shoe looks like? Well, bam!
So much so that in the later years, a lot of major decisions were made to kind of move away from what this system was trying to emphasize, and it got a rebranded new look with the Xbox One S. Released in 2016, the Xbox One S represents a very major shift in the thinking that Xbox had for their next generation systems. While the Xbox One was very heavily focused on multimedia services and being something more than a gaming machine, the One S was really getting back to being a gaming machine. It still had a lot of those other functionalities. It still has the HDMI in, for instance, and while they dropped the Kinect port, they did, for a limited time, still sell USB adapters if you wanted to use a Kinect, even though there weren't really any new games or new things emphasizing its use at all. The One S is a much smaller, much more minimalist design compared to the original Xbox One, though you can still see a kind of shared design language as far as how they wanted it to look. It doesn't have the gloss and matte mixture, but it still has the vents kind of cutting off some of the sides, similar placements for the disk drive, and same placement for the power button, though in this case, it is now an actual push button rather than a capacitive, which I absolutely loved. While the original Xbox One did come in a white color eventually, the One S launched in the white color, which really evoked the feeling feeling of the original 360, and I think that was really an intentional part of the marketing for this system, trying to talk about Microsoft going back to basics and what made the 360 a success, rather than trying to turn the Xbox One into something it wasn't, a gaming console. Of course, the One S was not the end of this messaging though. Microsoft had one more system in mind for this generation, which really pushed that focus on games, the Xbox One X. Released a year later in 2017, the Xbox One X was Microsoft's entry in what's kind of been known as the 0.5 generation systems, in that while it still played the same games as its previous incarnations, it added new support for higher resolutions, leading to better looking gameplay. Again, with these newer Xbox One systems, Microsoft really wanted to emphasize more of them being actual gaming systems, and so one of the big things they pushed about the One X is how it was now officially the most powerful system of its generation. The original Xbox One was actually weaker than the regular PS4, which also became true of the Xbox One S by extension, whereas the Xbox One X went out of its way to be more powerful than any other system of its time. It also managed to do this while actually being even smaller than the One S is. It's a longer system when in landscape mode, taller when it's in tower, but it's actually thinner and features an even more minimalist design that got rid of the top fence, and I think one of my personal favorite changes, moved the disc slot to, instead of being interrupting the body here, it put it in the little crevice between the base and the main body, which makes it look super clean. In my opinion, it's the best looking system out of the entire Xbox One line, and it really is the system that convinced me to start playing a lot more games on Xbox One. For a while, I was still running mostly PS4 with Xbox for some specific exclusives, but once this thing came out, it really became my go-to choice for a lot of multi-platform releases because, again, most powerful system, and was leveraging, if not true 4K for a lot of games, was getting them closer than its competition did. While the One S and One X were not able to completely undo the damage caused by the original Xbox One's launch, they really set a new tone for what it is Xbox wanted to emphasize with their systems, and laid the groundwork for what we're now seeing with their upcoming and pending systems, the Series X and Series S. Coming out in less than 2 months, these systems really represent an evolution of what Microsoft did with the Xbox One S and One X, and that's very heavily leaning into not only gaming, but gaming in a certain style. The Xbox Series X inherits the Xbox One X's emphasis on just being a high-power system, and moves away from being a smaller, compact one in exchange for something that is actually smaller than I expected it to be, but let's face it, is still definitely a noticeably larger console. And while it can support both tower and landscape mode, fully embraces that it should be something along the lines of a PC tower. Meanwhile, the Series S is being targeted as a system that delivers the same kind of games and the same gaming experience, but at a much more affordable price point at $300 rather than $500, and a much smaller, more traditional looking design. Like the Series X, it can do both tower or landscape, but they've definitely clearly favored landscape for this one, especially because of the direction the logo is inherited, and honestly, I just think it looks a lot better in that setup as well. While Sony's next-gen system, the PS5, is certainly aimed at being this crazy looking new unique design that is also massive, Xbox has definitely favored the approach of something that's a little more traditional and leans very heavily into the aesthetic they built with the Xbox One S and One X of focusing on boxes.
That's easy, all you need is a box.
And imagination.
So much so that both of these are just really flat out boxes. They got rid of the bases and are now just simply giant rectangles that are very simple looking, and depending on your preferred aesthetic, might be really great looking or maybe a little bit on the boring side. Over the years, Xbox has aimed to be multiple different things. The new gaming system to choose from that offers all high power. The new gaming system that emphasizes social networking. The new gaming system that emphasizes multimedia. And now with the Series S and X, I think the main goal is to really kind of relive what the 360 was aiming at, which was focusing on the games and the online gaming experience. With these systems, we've not only gotten a renewed interest in high-performance consoles, but Microsoft has also renewed interest in developing new IPs. While we only have a handful new ones coming out right now, with the idea of Halo Infinite being sometime next year, Fable sometime after that, Microsoft has taken time to acquire a lot more first-party studios over the past couple of years, with an emphasis on introducing fresh new blood to the system for this generation, and I'm really excited to see where it goes from here.